we're going to be learning about the Public Utilities Commission rule that just came out that I'm sure all of you have heard about. Make sure that you understand how net metering works and the reason for LePage's opposition. We will learn about the solar legislation that's coming on up. We'll be hearing from a representative from Revision about the economics and jobs. 2 years ago, we had a solar bill that didn't pass, but encouraged the PUC to conduct a value of solar study. You'll learn about that later. Last year, in 2016, there was another piece of legislation, solar legislation, that came up, and it lost by 2 votes. It was a Governor LePage veto, and we lost the override of that veto by just 2 votes. That's why this year we're going to make sure that we override any veto that LePage puts forth. Now, the Public Utilities Commission has done something very important in regard to solar and net metering. That's what you're going to find out about now.
The simplest way to describe net metering is that it gives solar customers full credit on their utility bills for the excess clean power they send to the grid, right? The power that they don't consume on the premises can get sent to the grid, and you get reimbursed. In effect, you're selling that power back to the grid, so that you get compensated for that. 43 states, including Maine, and I think Washington, D.C., have a net metering policy. So that's all it is. It's basically a billing process, right? You sell whatever power back to the grid, and you get credited kilowatt hour. And what's the most effective way of getting rid of solar? Get rid of net metering, okay? Just so you know what the PUC does, they're the ones, they do a lot of things, but for our purposes, they manage and administer the utility generation and distribution and compensation for utilities like CMP in the state of Maine, rate increases and all of that. They came out in February with their final new rules for solar power in Maine. And what do you know? It phases out net metering, right? And it does it over a period of 10 years. It's a step down every 2 years is a chunk that until you get to 0. So new customers will not have net metering. And it does grandfather existing solar users, like all the people you raised your hand, for 15 years. If you buy, I think, what's the number? If you install solar before January 1st of 2018, you would get this net metering for 15 years, okay? So that was the compromise. Now, I can tell you right now that this phasing out of net metering in 10 years and grandfathering 15 is the most extreme anti-solar rules in the country. In addition, new solar customers will be forced to install an extra meter on their solar panels at the expense of all ratepayers, so they can be forced to pay the utilities a fee for solar power that never enters the electrical grid. So even though you are not getting compensated for the power you're sending to the grid, you have to pay a fee. It's like Hannaford's charging you a fee for vegetables you grow in your garden, right? You see the absurdity of this kind of thing? And really, it's an attempt to suppress and punish solar, the solar market. And you should know, I just described this as one of the worst solar rules in the country. It's getting national attention. And you should also know LePage is opposing it. He wanted to phase it out faster. He wanted to eliminate it immediately, tomorrow. And no grandfathering, et cetera, et cetera. That's the background that gets us here today. So in order to overrule the PUC, to stop these new rules, the legislature has to take action. And they have to take action this year. And that's what the Seth Berry solar bill is about.
The Seth Berry bill will preserve net metering in legislation. It will become the law of the state. They won't be able to mess with it anymore. It will hopefully contain a solar rebate fund within it. This is more questionable than the other components because a lot of Republicans don't like rebates. They think that's a direct subsidy, And that would be more politically difficult to achieve. It might not end up in the final bill. We want it to, and we're going to lobby for it. Third-party financing means that a person can acquire solar without putting up cash.
The third part of the Berry bill is to open up the option for what's called third-party financing. Now, in many states, there are large solar installation companies that rather rent your rooftops in order to install solar energy. And then each year, you're paying them your energy bill. You're not putting up front any money to speak of, a small amount, but not a lot amount. They're the ones that pay for the installation on your roof, and you pay them your monthly energy bill. So that's one part of the third-party financing. The other part of it is, I don't have much money, but I want solar on my roof, and I can go through what's called a PPA, or a power purchase agreement, and that will put money up front, and then over time, I will pay that back. It's very limited in Maine at the moment. The Berry bill will increase access to that. Very important. Okay, so the fourth part of the Berry bill has to do with community solar farms. A solar farm is when you have a large array, maybe up to 90 panels. You have 9 different families who are members of the farm, very much like if you're a member of a condominium. You don't own but the condominium overall, but you do own, or you're a member of the condominium. Same thing with a community solar farm. It's for people who don't have capacity to put solar on their roofs. Maybe the roof is the wrong orientation, or there are trees around it, or perhaps it's because you rent. So a community solar farm is for people who want to go solar but don't have the opportunity to do it on their rooftops. At the moment, there is a 9-member limit. That means that limits not only the number of people or families who can have their meters on the farm, it also means that it limits the size of the farms. We all know that the larger you have an array, the greater the discount. Therefore, if we had the ability to have 25 members on the solar farm, they would probably be able to get a better discount, and people with lower incomes would be able to be members. Therefore, the Berry bill is removing the cap. It's removing that 9-member limit so that more people can participate in solar.
Thank you. So my name is Nick Sampson, and I work for Revision Energy. We have an office here in Portland, Maine, and one up in Liberty, Maine as well. And so I actually started working with the company at the end of 2014, and have been there for a little more than 2 years now. When I started, we had 80 employees, and we're now up to 150. And so we think that any type of solar policy that helps keep jobs in the state is important.
One of the most important parts of this bill is that it will increase the number of solar jobs in Maine. Who can complain about that? Democrat, Republican? No one's going to complain about that. Everybody wants to see more jobs. In particular, solar jobs have a large number of blue-collar jobs, installation jobs, that people can be trained. We don't have to be importing people from great universities to Maine in order to install the solar panels. Maine has the fewest solar jobs in all of New England. There are currently, in 2016, the solar census showed that there are about 500 solar jobs in all of Maine. In Vermont, which has a smaller population than Maine, there were 1,500, 3 times the number of solar jobs. Massachusetts has 15,000. They've got about 5 times our population, and yet they've got 30 times the number of jobs that we have. Maine can have a robust solar industry with excellent jobs and all the extra jobs that it creates in electricians and all kinds of other things if we have a strong, friendly solar legislation. In the country, solar has a very rapidly growing jobs industry. As a matter of fact, each year over the past about 4 years, it's been growing by about 20% each year. There are more solar jobs right now than there are in the entire coal industry in the United States. Currently, there are approximately the same number of solar jobs as there are in the natural fracked gas industry. So when they talk about more pipelines creating more jobs, solar energy also creates the same number of jobs.
I was also going to talk briefly just about the value of solar study and the findings of the value of solar study that the PUC had put together. They had a third party put together a couple of years back, and they basically looked at what is the value of exported solar electricity. And what the study found is that, that the value of that electricity has a market value of roughly 14 cents per kilowatt hour. And just to give you an idea, residential customers are paying roughly 13.35 cents a kilowatt hour right now. And then small businesses might be paying 12.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And larger businesses around the same or so. And so that study basically found that solar customers are actually adding value to the grid. Basically, we believe that the PUC's recent ruling, what it does is it ignores that value of solar study, and it arbitrarily chooses a reduction in the credit value moving forward.
Okay, now we're going to talk about what solar power can do to help our electric grid. There's something called peak and super peak, times of both the day and throughout the year. As energy is purchased from different sources, be it natural gas, hydroelectric, biomass, coal, nuclear, whatever it is, the energy grid has to have the same amount going into it from these different sources as people are needing. There are particular times of the year and particular times of the day that more energy is needed than others. So for instance, you wake up in the morning, not a lot of electricity in comparison to the daytime when all the businesses and offices have their lights and all of the factories are going and all of the transportation systems are happening. It's during the weekdays when people are in schools and working that there is what we call peak demand. And then people go home after they've had their dinner and they start getting ready for bed. All the electrical appliances, the washers and dryers, that demand goes down. That is a low time of demand. Therefore, the amount of electricity going into the grid during peak time is more expensive than the low demand time. Now we have one other phenomenon, and that is called super peak. The peak time during the day is the most expensive, and solar is, producing wonderful energy during the day, but during super peak time, that's when it is really needed. And that's in the summer when everybody's turning on their air conditioners. It starts around noon, 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and it goes right through 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And those air conditioners are blasting. And therefore, because of that, the need for more energy to go into the electric grid, the demand is much higher. Therefore, the supply has to come from new sources. It is solar that is also blasting during those very high air conditioning times that can provide energy to our grid. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about T&D. What everybody calls T&D, that stands for transmission and distribution. Some people say transmission and delivery. Pretty much the same thing. T&D, it's half of your bill. Half your bill is the supply, the source, the fuel, and half the bill is transmitting and delivering it to you. So half your bill is T&D, real important part to be an electric customer. You are a part of the electric grid. You are going to have it transmitted and delivered to you. It's good. The transmission and delivery charge includes things like big ice storm, lines are down, those trucks are going out, they're fixing your electric lines on your road. That's part of the transmission and delivery or transmission and distribution cost. It's good. Okay, now we got a little problem here though. The greater the distance that the source of electricity has to travel, the higher the transmission and delivery cost to us. Sometimes it's because you lose some of the electricity in the process of a lengthy transmission, but also it has to do with a larger infrastructure. The real question is, what is Maine's energy policy for the future? Is our policy reliant on foreign and distant sourced fuels, such as natural gas? At the moment, New York and Maryland have already banned fracking. That's what brings us our natural gas or fracked gas. The cost of energy is going to increase. Those price tags are going to increase. Or is it going to be on an increased amount of locally independent produced energy, such as solar? If it's solar, then you only need small transmission lines to go from my house, my panels, down the road to my neighbors. Those are thin, small transmission lines. They don't cost as much as the great, huge transmission lines or sources when you're bringing in great, enormous new infrastructure. The more we have solar in our energy policy mix, the more we can be assured of clean, renewable energy. We're going to finish up this section on jobs and economics with Governor LePage's argument against solar. And in many ways, it's an emperor's clothes that we need to expose. He has convinced people in Maine, including the legislators, that solar energy is being subsidized by poor people so that rich people can get panels on their roof. It is not true. You've already heard how solar energy is going to contribute to reducing costs. But here's the thing of it. In LePage's interview with Kevin Miller of the Press Herald, you will see he's not concerned about the financial effect of solar now. He says it's not a problem for now, but he's worried about it down the line, down the future, if solar expands. He's actually worried about what's going to happen in 2042. That's about 25 years from now. If he sees that if solar grows, in 25 years from now, it's going to be a problem for our transmission lines. It is not a problem now. Even LePage says it's not a problem now, it's a problem down the future. When you look at the current cost of transmission and delivery, the transmission lines that adding solar includes currently and would over the next 5-10 years, it's close to a nickel a month that everybody will be paying extra in order to include solar energy into the transmission grid, into the grid. It's actually about a half a nickel right now. It's about 2-3 cents right now. Over the next couple of years, it'll be a nickel, maybe a few pennies more, but not more than that. It's under $1 a year to make solar viable in the state of Maine. This is not a problem for the poor to subsidize the rich. That's what LePage is saying, and we have to be able to counter that argument honestly with our legislators when we're talking about it. And LePage is the one who said it in that Kevin Miller article. Check it out.
The art of lobbying, it can be nerve-wracking, but I've done it, and I'm an introvert, so if I can do it, any of you can do it, guaranteed. So we're lucky we have a citizens' government. That means that they are not lifetime politicians. They work in our communities.
They're just people. They're just other people. And a lot of times they're looking for information. They just want the information to make the best decision they can make. You are there to help them. That's your role. That's your job. They want to know what it means to their constituents.
They are looking at an average of about 1,200 bills during a session. There's no possible humane way that they can get the information they need for every bill. So how do you connect with your rep? I'm going to give you some real nitty-gritty details on how to do that. The most effective way is one-on-one. That's what we really are going for. We want you to have a private conversation with your rep. Usually a combination of contacts will work well.
4 C's of talking with your representative: connect, context, commitment, and catapult. Be cordial and polite. If you get in their face, they're going to turn you off right away. You're done as far as any arguments you're going to make. Many of them, you live in the same community that they live in. There have to be connections you can make, whether it's school, whether it's clubs, organizations, a meeting that you went to of theirs, whatever it might be. Tell your story. Why is it important to you? You know, be concise, be factual, pick out the 2 or 3 most important reasons that you want them to vote for this bill. Don't give them the laundry list. Why this makes sense for the economy, why this makes sense for jobs. Don't go after them for the environment if they don't care about the environment. And some of them don't, frankly. Commitment. Don't be afraid to ask, how do you think you're going to vote on this bill? And if they say, I'm going to vote against it, or I don't know yet, or whatever, what can I get you for more information that would be helpful? It gives you a chance to go back to them again. And finally, the catapult piece, follow-up. Either thanking them for the way that they have said they're going to vote and it's the way you want them to vote, or letting them know that you're concerned, still concerned, and your concerns are these things, but thank you for meeting with me.
Though those of you who have been to committee hearings, you know you can wait forever. You take a book, you take your knitting, you build a house. I mean, I've sat there for hours and hours and hours. If you don't want to sit there, or you know you only have a limited amount of time, take at least 20 copies of your statement, of your testimony, and you can hand it to the clerk who's always sitting there in the committee. And they tell us that the committee members will read your testimonies. So I'm going to be citizen. He's going to be Representative Lyman. I've done my homework. What I know about him, he's interested in living wages, encourage new business, more local controls, sporting traditions, and enhance tourism. He's married. He was elected in 2014. He got reelected for a second term. He's a professional. He's currently on the House and Human Services Committee, and he's never sponsored or co-sponsored an environmental bill. Hi, I'm Caroline Thorne-Lyman. Hi, Representative Lyman.
Nice to meet you.
How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank
Yeah,
you.
congratulations on getting reelected.
Oh, thanks.
I've heard some really good things about
Glad
it.
to be back here.
Yeah. You know, I noticed when you were campaigning, one of the big things was jobs, and I'm so with you on that. Totally agree with you on that one. Young people are coming back to the state. I know Governor LePage was talking about having young people, good paying jobs.
They're looking for jobs.
Yeah, so they're coming back to their communities. They had to leave the state thinking they didn't have a chance for a good job. Now they're back. You know, the PUC, they did this, they have a ruling that they're going to take away net metering, and that is the biggest thing that is motivating people to put
Net what?
net metering.
Oh.
Have you heard about it?
No.
Would you like more information
Yeah,
about it?
yeah.
Okay, then why don't I'll get you some, are you interested in knowing more about the solar bill?
It's going to bring in jobs?
Yeah, it's going to
Yeah.
bring lots of jobs. So I'll get you money, I'll get you information on the economics.
Money.
Money,
I'll
money.
take money.
I'll give you money. On the economics, the jobs. And okay, then I'll get back to you next week.
Oh,
Great,
thanks.
thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope that you will become one of the solar advocates that helps this solar legislation move forward. And if you have any questions, please contact us through 350maine.org or Sierra Club Maine. We look forward to hearing from you.